Welcome to the Jaron Jarvis channel. I am Jaron Jarvis. Today, I would like to introduce to you, She Made My Life Better. I got off from an especially tiring day of work that Friday evening and headed home in my nostalgia-ridden 1985 Cadillac Eldorado, and of course, like the city had done to me so many other times before, the drive home was long, arduous and particularly dreadful. What was poised to be a 30-minute-long drive turned into a near 2-hour experience with nothing but the faint buzzing caused by the changing of boring radio stations to keep me sane. As soon as I stepped through the front door of my humble estate, I suffocated in the all-consuming loneliness that had cemented itself in my home, ever since my beloved wife, of 8 years, had decided I suddenly wasn't what she wanted anymore. I don't particularly know what I was looking for that night. All I know is that I didn't want to be alone. And yet, I didn't want company either. I needed to be numb. I left my house in such haste, that I forgot to lock the door behind me. All I took with me were my car keys and my wallet. Hell, I was doing 120 on the freeway before I realized I wasn't even wearing shoes. But that didn't matter, not where I was going. Not to the good people at the Bludarium, Orlando's premier gathering point for the worst the city has to offer. I stumbled in, just narrowly avoiding the suspiciously sticky door frame. I surveyed the room for a whole 5 seconds before the stench of what had to have been the product of an unholy concoction of drugs, liquor, tobacco, condoms, and unwashed clothes, destroyed my nostrils. It was nothing more than exactly what I had expected, truly the last place on earth where someone could do whatever they wished without fear of judgment. I found an empty seat in front of the bar and winced at the millions of thoughts spiraling out of my head as to why the cushion was still so unbearably hot. I was about to order my drink when a voice behind me spoke. "You're in my seat, darling." I had yet to see who had spoken at me, but I felt them, their presence, their spirit, their fire. She had a darkness inside of her, and I was wrapped in robes of white. Perhaps for far too long, because I could stand it no longer, my linen cloths yearned to be stained. With all my energy, I turned towards her and charmingly replied, "I believe you meant to say, 'You are my seat, darling.'" I could tell my words fell flat. I had made a mistake. I judged her by the way she was provocatively dressed in red and black and the way she composed herself. My assumption was wrong. This wasn't a woman that would make having her easy. I was terrified that seconds in, I had already blown any chance at some kind of relationship. She went to open her lips again and I listened attentively. "I think you know that failed, but you're cute, so, you're welcome to try again," she said as she took the seat next to me. With the grace of 1,000 veteran ballerinas, I was overjoyed at her mercy and quickly apologized for the lame attempt to pick up. We laughed the remainder of the night away in an intoxicated haze. When we broke midnight, she told me that there was some things we needed to do, but under one condition. I couldn't say no. I haphazardly agreed and we headed out of the bar without paying for our drinks. Immediately a newfound rush of purpose struck me. I had never in my entire life done something so exhilarating. It may not seem like much to you, but to a guy that has always lived his life by the books and has had his entire life planned out, not paying a bar tab was a whole new world of excitement. Things only increased in intensity from there, as we vandalized a cop car, broke a street lamp, and let all the animals loose from the pound that she somehow managed to break into. Throughout the night I felt some weird manifestation of shame, but not out of guilt of the things we were doing, rather, ashamed at the absence of guilt. So long as she was there I was invincible. Only one thing was clear from the entire night. I was extremely glad that Agnes had divorced me when she did. I don't think I could have been able to cheat on her with the beauty that stood before me tonight. In my barely conscious state, I made a realization. I hadn't a clue what her name was. I stumbled over my words and managed a scintilla of composure to do what could scarcely be considered speaking. "Hey, I know I'm very drunk right now, which is probably why I can't seem to remember your name. Do you mind repeating it?" I slurred. She arrowed in on my face, the light dimmed behind her, all the noise faded, and for a divine moment all that existed was her. Leaning in close and fully embracing me, she put her supple fingers around the nape of my neck, her lips caressing my ears, "Don't worry about that, David, I never told you," she whispered gently, quickly heading away from my reach and disappearing into the early dawn. She had a darkness within her, and I needed to find it again. The next morning I awoke to a throbbing headache. The consequences from the purpose of the night before were finally catching up with me. My body ached and it truly felt like every single nerve ending was firing all at once. I was in a flurry of pain and it was getting worse by the second. I soon started emptying the contents of my stomach onto my bathroom floor and toilet. I frantically searched for aspirin or Tylenol around my house, scouring through my memory for where I may have left them. Yet to my pleasant dismay, the only thing in my mind were burning images of her. I found myself distracted by her every time I closed my eyes, at peace with myself, and after a few seconds I had remembered exactly where the painkillers were hidden. She had cleared my mind. I was bedridden for the next few hours waiting for the pills to work, but my patience was never rewarded. Still remained the same unusually potent throbbing and pounding, still I remained cold while covered in layers of warmth, still I frequented the bathroom when it seemed like I had nothing else to vomit. This was no ordinary pain, no ordinary experience. This was genuine suffering. That was when I understood what I was going through. I had seen it before in my brother, whom last year, passed away from a heroin overdose. I was going through withdrawal. My body was curiously exhibiting similar symptoms to those present in recovering addicts, only it didn't make any sense for me. Since Adam's death I had avoided all forms of intoxicants, except for the rare drink here and there. There was absolutely nothing I could be flushing out of my system. I struggled in my bed, searching for comfort. When I closed my eyes once more and again I felt a sweet release brought about by her existence. In my head I heard her faintly, only this didn't feel like a memory. She was talking to me in the present. From her pursed lips she whispered a single word: pocket. I opened my eyes, accepting the pain as it came like ocean waves pounding against my body, and I trudged through it, searching every possible pocket in the clothing that I had worn the night before. Then I found it, crumpled up in my left pant pocket, a number, 10 digits, a phone number, and just like that all the pain gradually reduced to nothing, for I had finally received another dose. Instantly I picked up my cell phone and dialed. With every digit entered I could feel my heart nearly beat out of my chest in exuberant anticipation. The line rang seemingly without end, and as time waved on I feared that she would not answer. Panic set in and I could feel my body starting to ache again. My heart beat faster, with fear now, not excitement. Sweat poured down my face, my hopes sinking deeper and deeper away from the light. I feared what was going to happen to me, and then she saved me once more, in the form of voicemail. That frighteningly beautiful, pre-recorded message kept me sane for the rest of the day, anxiously awaiting a return call. At this point you must be thinking that I was obsessed with her, and that would be a fair assessment, but you have to understand, she was the type of girl that you become obsessed over. Her speech, her demeanor, her stance, her laugh, her body, her everything. And in the dead of night, my phone buzzed. She had a darkness within her, and it reached out to me first. I barely slept that night. Her text message kept echoing in my brain. What could she mean by the words "prepare for Sunday"? My mind was supercharged with possibilities, every new idea being 10 times as exciting as the previous one. What was she going to ask of me? The question toiled in my head for hours on end without ever making progress on finding what could be denoted as the answer. The morning sun shined on me and my hopeful spirit, impatiently awaiting for her to appear. At around 9 a.m. there was a single knock on my door, and without hesitation I jumped out of my bed and hurried down the stairs and opened the door with happy relief. There she was, as gleaming and beautiful as the night that I had met her. I modestly invited her in, and she quickly made herself at home. I didn't mind the fact that she had tracked mud all through the house, or that she was grabbing and touching anything she could reach without permission, because to me, this was a gift. I could remember her by the things she touched around my house. After she had finished examining my belongings, she turned to me and broke the silence. "You have everything you need, right, David?" she said assertively, almost devoid of passion. I was entranced. I had not listened to the question and yet, with absolute certainty, I knew the answer. I nodded in agreement. She seemed a bit taken aback by my immediate willingness to do what she wanted. I felt, no, I knew this because of the coldness that she had towards me while exiting through the door. She didn't even make an attempt to grab my hand, she didn't even look at me. I had done something that displeased her. I don't know if she understood that I hadn't done it intentionally. All I wanted to do was make her happy. All I needed to do was make her happy. We started down the road, in her, visibly, beaten down motorcycle, and once again I felt alive. The danger of the open road, especially at the speed we were going, coupled with her angel hair subtly tickling my face, was rapidly filling me with joy and passion unparalleled to anything I had ever felt before. We were eventually stopped by a police officer for speeding, and when she got the ticket, she crumpled it up inside of her breast pocket, gave an indecent nod to the officer, and off we drove again. She was an unyielding storm. I counted every second that I was in her presence as a blessing. She had a darkness within her, and it touched me. We had entered this quiet old town after an hour or so of driving. We parked in front of a convenience store that honestly seemed like it could afford to lose some of its wealth. Which is why I was so ready and willing to what she asked of me while handing me a gun that I am still unsure as to whether or not was loaded. I'll spare you the details because they aren't really necessary, since the robbery I committed alone. Anyways, that took place about a month ago, and since that day I only felt myself getting ever closer to her, till finally I set foot in her apartment. And oh my, it was perfection. Every single inch of the apartment was coated with her essence, like she had ripped pieces of herself off and used them to mold the rooms to what she wanted. It was a kind of magic. I had never in my entire life been so entirely enthralled by a home, but every decoration, all the furniture, her own paintings, it all fit together so perfectly to create a dwelling place for gods themselves. But everything pales in comparison to the crown jewel of the estate. Her bedroom. I breathed it in, as my eyes soaked the penetrating purple of her accented wall. While she was in the kitchen preparing 2 glasses of wine, I began planning out exactly how I was going to, for lack of a better term, consummate our relationship. The reason I am getting as personal as I am is because I need you to understand what she was, and why I did the things I did. I am not the villain, I am merely a victim of meeting perfection. Trust me, if put in my place, any one of you would have reacted the same way. I decided to try something I had seen in a TV show, seeing as how it was a last-ditch effort and I think I have a pretty decent physique. I disrobed completely and awaited her return. Naturally she was taken aback, but within her awe I witnessed pleasure. You see, I was playing her game. Over all the time we had spent together she had taught me how to play with my demons, how to give into my flesh, how to get what I needed. And in that moment, I needed her. Through that gorgeous smile I saw her for what she really was. She began removing her garments slowly and sensually, carefully showing me every inch of her flawlessly painted physique. No longer hiding any piece of herself, found myself shuddering in the vastness of the shadow she cast upon my humble spirit. Our bodies were inexplicably intertwined. For God's sake, we were no longer on earth. I cannot express the things she did to me that night. To try and quantize it into words would be committing the greatest of offenses to her memory. After losing our chastity against one another, I only felt closer and closer to her, and it continued on for a while. Pleasing her became my sole focus in life. Anything she wanted of me I gave. If my job was interfering with some fun activity she wanted to do, I just wouldn't show up, till eventually I got fired. If I was hanging out with what little friends I still had and suddenly she texted me to meet her, I would unhesitatingly drop everything and go. And if ever she asked for anything to be bought, in spite of no longer having a steady income, I would be there to buy it. Yet still, in her absence, I felt lonely, worthless, and in horrific unending agony. Because of her I watched as my emotional, financial, and social stabilities all entered free fall, but I wasn't helpless. No, I don't know why, but I watched myself hit rock bottom with a smile spanning from ear to ear. Anything, as long as it's what she wanted. She had a darkness within her, and she showed it to me. As time droned on, I felt myself slipping further and further away from reality, losing what little grasp I had on my world that she hadn't already taken from me. I had always been a level-headed, rational man, I always managed to maintain a clear mind, but now, I was powerless to her and I was entirely unable to figure out why. She had not contacted me in several hours. The respite from her fiery presence gave me a single moment of clarity and an overwhelmingly powerful thought entered my mind. She is evil. It was a putrid thought, an idea creeping in as a result of unwilling flesh. I felt I had betrayed her, I felt criminal, I felt I had to be punished. I rushed down the stairs of my home, which had now become an above-ground cesspool riddled by my own filth. I hurried towards the kitchen, emptying the utensil cabinet, searching for the sharpest knife I could find. As I pressed the tip of the blade firmly against my forearm, she came to my mind once more. This time she was standing in a cold, desolate garden. Trees that once bore fruit now turned into barren carcasses. The cruel bite of winter had clearly touched her as she appeared lifeless and without any meaningful amount of blood coursing through her. Her eye sockets were transfixed on what appeared to be a lonely headstone that rested atop the rot and decay that once housed foliage. I felt the cold begin to touch my skin, and with that, I knew this wasn't a hallucination. I inched closer to her, with every step more painful and agonizing than the last. When finally I got close enough to read the engraving on the tombstone, I was terrified to find my own name waiting for me. But then I understood, this wasn't some alternate dream world, this was a glimpse into the future, and she was mourning me, long after I had passed. As I turned around to look at her for some kind of explanation, she had transformed, from a beauty that surpassed perfection into some wretched creature from the bowels of hell. Her body had become slender and crooked, her back arched in an unholy manner and her spine began to protrude. Her fingers had grown and from their tips extended darkened nails that looked sharp enough to pierce through anything. It moved closer to me, slinking along with every step. It placed its demonic head in front of mine, opening its mouth to reveal a series of rotten and jagged bone that did not closely resemble teeth. A vile and morbid stench emanated from the open crevice. I was frozen in place, from both the deadly cold and my own exhilarating fear. It caressed my chest with its decomposing hands. The creature began to slowly penetrate into my chest. I screamed in torment. And then I woke up to reality. The knife had been completely embedded into my arm, the hilt stuck to my elbow crease and the tip having just punctured through the edge of my wrist. I was numb to the pain, and only because I finally understood why I needed her the way that I needed her. It was because she wasn't from this world, not by any stretch of the imagination. She was hiding from this world, afraid of not being accepted. I knew that was her in my vision. I knew that I had gained her trust, for as horrible as that devil creature appeared, it was still her, the real her, and I was going to help with her becoming. She had a darkness within her, and it needed to be set free. I was dead set on completing my new objective in the shortest amount of time possible. First I needed to take care of the wound that I had given to myself on my left arm. I grabbed the last bottle of whiskey that I still owned, swallowed a more than generous amount, and poured what little was left over my arm, and still there was no pain. Only an intense focus coupled with a blistering desire to see my task fulfilled. I crudely wrapped my arm in bandages that were unquestionably past sanitary usage. But it was fine. I wasn't looking for a permanent solution, and as I stumbled out of the door I felt a fleeting happiness. My excitement poured out of every pore of my body. On more than one occasion, my arousal took the best of me as I swerved on the street, back in my 1985 Cadillac Eldorado, which I hadn't ridden since I discovered the thrill of motorcycles. It's a miracle that there were no cops on the street that could have impeded me accomplishing my goal. I hardly made an attempt to park, feeling no pity for the dead dog I'm fairly certain I killed while I carelessly parked the car. In my mind it was a necessary sacrifice, and I'm certain when the owner of that pet saw her, they too would understand. I bolted to the floor of the apartment, images of her true self branded inside my mind, their playback running tandem to my imaginative thoughts of how she would thank me. Would she make me like her? Would I see the world she came from? Would I be able to stay by her side forever? I knocked on the door and she answered immediately. Dressed as beautifully as ever. I confronted her again as to why there was never any mention of her name, and again, I was met with nothing but excuses. This time I understood though. She couldn't tell me a name because she never picked a name for this world. This I knew and this I know. I pressed on with my interrogation, and for the first time in all the months that I was in her presence, I found myself irritated by her. Not a single straight answer, and when I begged, on my knees, to show me her true self, she answered only with, "What the fuck are you talking about, David? Okay, I'm asking nicely, please leave now, you're clearly drunk." I will admit, I got caught up in my own emotions and passion, but when she ordered me to leave, when all I wanted to do was help her, I got angry, and I grabbed her and demanded that she come out. I recognize how crazy this may seem to all of you, but that is simply because you don't fully understand the severity of the situation. I screamed and I roared, and I violated my love for her, all in the hopes that it would lead to what I needed from her. But no, she refused me. After everything I did, after all I gave up, she neglected to give me this. In that moment I understood what needed to happen. If she wouldn't show me willingly, I would have to force the change, and there was only one way to do that. Destroyed the body she was using to hide herself with. I grabbed her hair and pulled the body into the kitchen, with my good arm so I could maintain control, and with my other arm I grabbed a knife and begrudgingly carved into her perfect physique. With every single thrust I felt more and more fulfilled. Blood poured out of the body in ocean-like waves, and I am not ashamed to say that as it colored me red, I was close to climaxing. How could I not? Her body was, for the first time, under my complete control. There were screams, of course, and times when she begged me to stop, but I expected nothing more. I don't imagine transformations like these are particularly easy. Her entrails graced the apartment's floor in a way I could never dream of, and I sat down, waiting to see the fruits of my labor. It's now been 30 minutes since I've started writing this, and there hasn't been much movement, a few spasms here and there, which I figure have been her trying to break free. I wrote all this in the hopes that all of you could prepare yourselves for the world to come, as I doubt she is the only one of her kind. When they set down on our world, all of you, and all of them will thank me for my efforts. You may disagree with my methods, but I did the right thing. I know this because she had a darkness within her, and it called me by name.